there's changes happening in Latin America, not necessarily in the U.S., that I think would end up with some degree of change in the relationship. Essentially, what we've seen in Latin America over the past 2-3 years is more and more governments moving to the right. Leftist governments have run into trouble politically and economically. That's the case in Brazil, that's the case in Argentina, that's the case in Ecuador, that's the case in Chile, that's going to be probably the case at some point in Venezuela. And so what we've seen is governments being elected that are more moderate and more to the right, and essentially from the economic policy perspective, which is really the most important issue in Latin America, much more willing to engage with the U.S. and in general to open up for trade. The paradox of what's happening is that the region now is moving towards more opening and trying to establish more ties with the U.S., but also with Europe and other advanced economies, at a time where those economies don't have any interest in doing. So I think one change that you can see is that governments in Brazil, Argentina, Colombia, Chile, trying essentially to increase their levels of engagement through trade with the U.S. and just not having any real reception in the U.S. because Trump is probably not going to be interested in that. Now, the impact of that is that I think we will see more and more efforts to develop trade integration within the region, just that it won't have the power that it would have if it was with the U.S., and probably slowly more efforts to try to continue to increase trades with ties with China. China has increased its role in the region somewhat, but without really that much success, except in a few cases like Venezuela. If China really starts to take over as being really the driver of globalization, then we can see a move towards that, at least an opening towards that, even though governments in Latin America would prefer to do it with the U.S.